Kia ora whānau, it's been a while. It is the 2nd of September, which means that I have been on testosterone now for, damn it, 1 year and 5 months. Now, considering 6 months of that time, I was on quite a fluctuating dose. The dose wasn't really consistent enough to make too much change. The last 5 months back on testosterone patches instead of testosterone shots, I've been definitely noticing more change. My voice started cracking again, so like that started again, so it's dropping more. Yeah, just little bits and pieces like that. My facial hair is continuing to come in, which is really cool. I have a new laptop, so I can't, it doesn't have a good enough webcam to actually display, but my sideburns were going kind of down to here, and then like they were quite patchy as well. I was shaving them from about 2 months in, but I am noticing like more coming down here and stuff under my chin, and like my fulcrum area is filling in the middle, because right at the start it was like here and nothing here. So that's filling in, which is really cool. One of my friends and I are going to have a beard growing competition as soon as my face is growing well enough. Hopefully that will be in another 6 months at the rate of growth at the moment. Other things that are new are I was referred by my endocrinologist to both a psychiatrist and a plastic surgeon back in February. And I saw the psychiatrist in March, and he did an assessment. And I'm just gonna hit pause so that I could get my letter. So the psychiatrist has written this really, really lovely 5-page summary of the 3 appointments that I had with him. And I thought that I was being really quite brief with him, and I didn't say too much quite deliberately, because I don't tend to want psychiatrists in my care. I like more holistic types of mental health care as opposed to medical types of mental health care. So I have this report, and it starts out with talking about my gender identity, so explaining that I identify my gender as being takatapui. I don't really give it any specific name, but if I was to be explaining it to people who aren't from New Zealand, or who aren't Māori, or who aren't familiar with the term, I would describe it with the term non-binary, or transmasculine, or anything like that. They're all sort of correct-ish. He's used he/him pronouns throughout the entire letter, and it was really strange for me to read through this 5-page letter that he wrote in July, that I only just got this week, that uses he/him pronouns along with my name. He wrote the letter 4 months after he actually saw me, so to me, obviously, he just hadn't remembered that. But I have mixed feelings about it. I know I say to people who just can't seem to wrap their head around my pronouns, I say, just use he or him, it's okay. Just please don't use she, her. So, he talks about how my opinions on colonialism, that came up at some point. We talk about how my mental health has been impacted by how transgender I am. So he's written, Scout did not recollect any feelings around puberty, but this time was clouded by the development of an eating disorder which stemmed from his response to his physical development and issues with regard to eating. Scout explained that eating disorders were common in transgender teenagers. So, anecdotally, because we haven't got any like actual data on this, anecdotally, trans teenagers are more likely to experience eating disorders because they will try and suppress puberty with not eating, and it works far too well. And it's really not a healthy way to cope with things. So if you are a trans teenager and you are struggling with food, you're not the only one. And please try and access some support from the different services that exist in different countries for people who are transgender or who have eating disorders, because it's not the answer, and it could jeopardize your ability to take hormones, or it could jeopardize your ability to have surgeries that you might find necessary for yourself. The letter continues. Scout recognises now that this was a futile and costly attempt to deny reality. He said that he had eating disordered behaviour his whole life, exclusively of a restricting nature, and that this is a clear reflection in his discomfort in trying to be feminine, because this is what I felt society was pressuring me to do. The attempt was, in Scout's view, overwhelming and distressing, and an expression of their desperate attempts to control their body. I'm trying to read this with my own pronouns. The letter talks about my testosterone, it talks about my experiences with CFS-ME, talks about how I would like to be more masculine, but maybe in a more androgynous way, the social transition changes I've made, etc. He talks about my past psychiatric history, which I really didn't want to speak about with this psychiatrist, and I didn't really feel like I had a choice. You know, he was asking a lot of questions about my mental health, and I mean, he couldn't access my mental health records because Dunedin Hospital was full of asbestos, and no one can get past the asbestos in the basement to get to the patient notes, and my patient file is now down there. So he couldn't actually access my notes. He talks about my PTSD, hospital admissions, etc. Apparently I was born in Scotland, so he heard that I was born in Stratford in Taranaki in the North Island, and thought that I meant Stratford as in like Scotland. So that was a really long overview of basically the letter, but ultimately he says, Scout presented to me as a very clear, direct and articulate informant, clearly willing to discuss many aspects of his life, but perhaps appropriately circumspect in discussing others. I'm going to be a good counsellor. Initially he saw the process as something as often imposition, which it is, but he was good enough to engage with me throughout. He did not appear to be unduly tense or anxious, and on the occasions that I saw Scout there was no obvious disturbance of mood, which is funny because one of the times I saw him was actually the day after I got out of the psych ward, and he didn't know that. He did not exhibit any thought disorder, perceptual disturbance, or abnormal thought content. Again, I'm incredibly good at masking, and I've been doing that my entire life. I think it worked out in my favour this time. He says that I definitely, although my own view of gender departs from the classifications that are kind of accepted in the psychiatric world, he says that I would be considered to have gender dysphoria for the purposes of this assessment, that I am fully capable of understanding the nature and consequences of surgeries and other medical interventions, and that I can make a competent decision. So from the end of that letter, I am able to get top surgery, which is super duper exciting. Sorry, that was like a 5-minute lead up to that little piece of information, but yeah, I've been okayed for top surgery. So the next step is on the 25th of October. I have an appointment with the plastic surgeon again. I saw her once last month, and because I hadn't received the letter from the psychiatrist yet, because he didn't believe that the local hospital was actually doing the surgeries, so he sent it to my GP as opposed to the surgeon. Yeah, so he sent that letter late, so the surgeon wasn't able to put me on a waiting list and was only able to do half the assessment, which was a physical assessment and a discussion of what I wanted done. So on the 25th of October, we'll get together again and we'll talk about an actual plan. Will put me on a waiting list. I don't think there'll be another physical assessment. I really hope there won't be. Yeah. In other news, on the 9th of September, in 7 days, 7? Yes, 7, I will be doing a TED Talk in Dunedin at Otago Polytech. Tickets are $99 each, so you aren't obligated to be there if you live in Dunedin, unless you're my parents. Yeah, I don't have much more news. This was a very rambling video to ultimately say that I'm getting my tits lopped off, but it'll be really cool to go from a C cup down to nothing, hopefully, and it's about a year-long waiting list, but it's going to be worth it to be getting that done without having to pay for it, because the bill is something that many trans people just cannot feasibly do. So, wish me luck.